Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Nate, and welcome back to another weather forecast discussion, this time from March 20th, 2022. We are still on track, unfortunately, for a multi-day tornado outbreak for many across portions of the southern United States. The latest outlooks by the Storm Prediction Center include a 3 out of 5 on the severe weather scale with a 10% chance of significant tornadoes in the southeastern portions of Texas on Monday, and a 4 out of 5 on the severe weather scale with the threat for significant weather on Tuesday. Of course, I will be providing live and free radar coverage here on this same YouTube channel for those who may be concerned with this event. If you want to stay up to date with this significant event, please be sure to subscribe and hit that bell button right next to the subscribe button in order to stay up to date and get a notification as to when I will be live streaming on Monday, on Tuesday, and possibly even on Wednesday. Matt will also be chasing for us Monday and Tuesday. Him and I have a pretty good reputation here on this channel for finding tornadoes and getting information out, so all we can do is hope that people heed our warnings. However, it's up to you all to help me get the word out to as many people as possible, so please copy the link to this video and spread it with as many people as possible on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, text message, all sorts of places, especially if they live in these areas, because they could potentially get impacted by some sort of significant weather. I'm guaranteeing you someone more than likely will be hit by a tornado, may even be a significant tornado. So if we try and get as many people prepared as possible, then no one will have to be scared at the end of the day, and they can just go right to their safe spaces, their safe plans, and get into shelters. Also, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button, that like button down below to help me get this out to more and more people on YouTube's platform, because this is going to start to garner a lot of attention here as this gets closer and closer to the event. And if people are on YouTube, they're trying to figure out what's going on, they'll look at the video, they'll look at the live stream, and we'll be able to get this information out to them. So let's dive in a little bit as to the timings of this event and how this is expected to move on through. It is above me in Eastern, so if you're in Central, you're going to want to subtract 1 hour. And of course, we're going to be using the HRRR model in the beginning, but we are going to actually switch to the NAM model as we get further and further out into the future. So as we continue to play this through, you can see how we have a lot of spotty convection out in front of this. A lot of these thunderstorms start to begin to form across the general area, but that is not the main concern. The main concern here is going to be these thunderstorms right over here, this massive line that is going to start to garner a lot of attention once we get towards the general vicinity of 4 to 5 in the afternoon. I would say 4 at the earliest. Could be a little bit earlier actually than that. About 3:30 is when some of these strong thunderstorms can start to form, the supercells. And they're going to be a little bit further to the west of the I-35 area. So if you're along I-35 from Dallas all the way down to San Antonio, you guys definitely need to be watching. And then areas north of Abilene could potentially have some supercells over there, some thunderstorm activity that can create some large hail. And look at this massive line that starts to move on through. This is expected to continue to move on through all the way through into the late overnight and evening hours. And then you see a new band of initiation here, massive line here that really starts to gain traction and extends here from Corpus Christi all the way up into Shreveport and even further along, paralleling the Mississippi River along Arkansas and Mississippi. And this is just basically going to continue to be a pretty big severe weather event as we go from Monday into Tuesday. You can see here as that line continues to push off further and further to the east, you get some very strong damaging winds along that line. But the big concern here is these thunderstorms that form out in front of it. If you get any of those thunderstorms that could go out in front of it and take advantage of that warm, ripe, and very unstable atmosphere, you can potentially get some significant tornadoes there as well. And so we have the potential for some strong activity there as it continues to move on through. But the good news is that it looks like the line starts to deteriorate, especially as we get closer and closer towards the midnight hours and even further as we move on through from Wednesday. And you can see even as we move off towards the lower resolution portion of this model here, you can see how the line starts to lose more and more traction as it pushes off towards the east here from Wednesday and even further on into Thursday. So this entire area here from central to eastern Texas all the way through into Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and the panhandle of Florida, you guys are all under this severe weather risk, and even portions of the Carolinas too could potentially get into the activity as well. Now, what is it that makes this event tick? Why is this doing it now? Why is there this big severe weather event, tornado event that is happening here across portions of the southern United States. And in order to do that, we have to take a look at the atmosphere and how it flows, how it moves. And we're going to take a look at the upper portion of the atmosphere here, the 500 millibar wind shear, which is about 6 kilometers above ground level, pretty high up in the sky. And you can see that we have a lot of these dips, and then we have these loops and stuff like that. Whenever this line starts to dip, this is the jet stream here. Whenever the jet stream starts to dip down towards the south, that is called a trough. And at the center of that trough is where a low pressure system actually exists. When it starts to loop up and loop north, then at the bottom of that loop right here, that is where you find a high pressure system. And so you have this big low pressure system that is starting to move off across portions of the southwestern United States and dig on through and towards the central portions of the United States, creating some enhanced level amounts of wind shear across the areas to watch, with wind shear amounts in upwards of 60 to 80 knots within the area to where there could potentially be severe weather. And this is expected to continue to intensify further and further, especially as we go from Monday into Tuesday. Some enhanced level amounts of wind shear, which is the reason why we do have that 4 out of 5 on the severe weather scale, with the potential of a regional tornado outbreak possible here across portions of Louisiana and Mississippi. And then even the wind shear continues to amplify more and more as we extend further towards Wednesday into Thursday. Meanwhile, a little bit lower down to the ground, 1 kilometer above ground level, we have our 850 millibar low-level jet that is really starting to kind of crank out a lot of this southerly wind, bringing a lot of warm Gulf of Mexico moisture across much of these areas here in this general watch area. And you can see how that low-level jet actually continues to amplify as we get closer and closer towards the days in question and the time periods in question, with wind shear here about 60 knots to even almost 70 knots in some spots as this continues to move on through. And you can see that rise in the moisture here in the dew points as we transition from Sunday into Monday. You can see how relatively across the board, the dew points are relatively low. We have a couple wildfires ongoing right now, just to the south and west of Dallas, Fort Worth. But then, of course, that all changes as we get towards Monday evening. Look at all these ripe dew points here in these oranges, indicating 60-degree dew points and above. As soon as you see 60-degree dew points, you can start to think about severe weather, because that is enough moisture for thunderstorms to start to form, pop off, and really get going. So this is definitely something to watch out for as this continues to move on through. You can see how the line continues to push off, and then you see a new reinvigoration of some relatively moist dew points out in front of that line, again indicating 60 to almost 70-degree dew points in Louisiana and Mississippi. And that's the reason why the event continues to elongate even further on towards Tuesday. But what really makes this event tick is something called the convective available potential energy, or CAPE for short. What that basically is the warm air rising and the cold air sinking in the atmosphere. The displacement between the two can be measured in an energy level, and of course the higher the energy level, the higher the chance for thunderstorms to either form or sustain and maybe even become significant. So we find that energy here within some of these areas. If we find above 1,800 to 2,000 joules per kilogram, well, we have a good general sense that there probably could be some severe weather possible. And indeed we have that. If we take a look at the bottom right-hand corner, we actually have almost 3,000 joules per kilogram of convective available potential energy in some of these areas, indicating that there is enough energy for thunderstorms to form or sustain and potentially even become significant within some of these areas. So we definitely have to watch out for how the thunderstorms interact with all this CAPE. And even as we progress this from Monday into Tuesday, you can see you even have over 2,000 joules per kilogram of CAPE across portions of central to southern Mississippi and eastern Louisiana as well. So the severe weather threat does exist over there as well. But the one thing that's going to be really interesting is how the environment interacts with each other at different levels. And we already talked about it on a wind shear perspective. Let's talk about it from a moisture perspective. And we're going to take a look at the 700 millibar relative humidity to try and gander as to what could potentially happen here with our elevated mixing layer. What that basically does is this is going to prohibit thunderstorms from forming until it's at its absolute peak. All right, when it's at its pinpoint top peak performance, that is when thunderstorms will start to form. And in order for us to find that elevated mixing layer, we need to find some dry air within some of these areas. And if you find any of these browns across any of the areas here in southeastern Texas, well, that's when you know that there's probably going to be an elevated mixing layer there, indicating that thunderstorms aren't going to form unless it's at its peak performance. And that right there, my friends, is not a good thing, because If we don't have this, we have all sorts of thunderstorms that form across the board. They fight for that energy. They fight for that moisture. If it's going to make it so that thunderstorms form when it's at its peak performance, it automatically starts to form at its peak here, then we're going to have fewer thunderstorms that are going to fight for a lot more expansive energy field that could basically signify for some significant tornadoes in some of these areas. So because I see that we do have a plume of dry air over here about 3 kilometers above ground level, that tells me that there could potentially be some significant tornadoes as well as some very large hail within some of these storms as well. Now, the good news is if we zoom this off towards tomorrow, we don't really have that here. We have a little bit of it. You can see that there's a little bit of dry air trying to seep on through in towards the general area of where that moderate risk is, or the 4 out of 5 in the severe weather scale. But it's not as prominent as the day prior, so that's the good news. But of course, the bad news is that amplified wind shear that we showed you, with how the wind shear continues to intensify as it moves further and further eastward. And because of that significant wind shear, that is the reason why this event here on Tuesday is appearing to be a lot more significant than the event on Monday. And just for some reference as to how significant some of that wind shear is, we take a look at the favorable wind shear for tornadoes to form here by measuring what helicity is. And we're going to take a look at the helicity from 0 to 3 kilometers above ground level. And we have some very, very strong helicity numbers. We want about 150 or above in order for us to consider tornadic storms. And we do have that. As a matter of fact, we have more than that in some of these areas here. The good news is that the further north you get, the less amount of energy there is, if we take a look back at that convective available potential energy from earlier. And so the good news there is that if you're over along the Red River, you guys aren't really anticipated to get a lot of significant activity. But look at that, still down towards the south, areas out near the San Antonio, Austin, Waco, Killeen, even further towards the College Station areas. You guys have quite the amount of helicity here, especially as we go from the afternoon into the evening and overnight hours. And then, of course, as we translate from Monday into Tuesday, you can see that helicity still continues to exist across portions of Louisiana and Mississippi. So still something that we got to continue to watch out for as this continues to progress further and further. Once again, we will be covering this live on the channel here Monday, Tuesday, and possibly Wednesday. So please be sure to stick around, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay up to date with all of that. That's going to be it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like, and also help me spread this information by copying the link and share this with friends and family and on social media like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Also follow me on social media. Link will be in the description down below. I will catch you guys tomorrow, and let's just hope that this does not look as bad as what the Storm Prediction Center says, for all of our sakes here, not just on the channel, but for the people who live in these areas. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys tomorrow. Peace out.